Like with the database, we strongly recommend that you use out-of-place patching. When you use out-of-place patching, it minimizes the downtime you need to apply patches to the GI. It also minimizes the risk because there's less things to do in your maintenance window. And in case you need to roll back to the previous patch level, that is also a lot easier when you use out-of-place patching. Now, it's not only about patching grid infrastructure, it's also about patching the database. There are two options here. Either you can patch GI and the database together, or you can do it separately. If you do it together, you only need to take one outage, you have one maintenance window, but it needs to be so long that you can patch first GI and the database. In contrast to that, if you patch GI and database separately, you need to arrange for two maintenance windows, but they'll be shorter because there's only one operation in each of them. If you decide to patch GI and database separately, the two maintenance windows that you arrange for GI and the database, they should be fairly close to each other, like two following weekends. Don't patch GI in 1 month and then proceed with the database 3 months later. Keep it fairly tight. Here's a few tips for patching grid infrastructure. The first is about the cluster verification utility, or CLUFI. Before you patch GI and after you patch GI, you can use the cluster verification utility to ensure that there is no problems with your cluster. Ideally, you use CLUFI, or the cluster verification utility, through either AuraCheck or ExaCheck. So go to the appropriate channels and get the latest version of AuraCheck or ExaCheck, and then run these checks before and after you patch GI. It's a lightweight and non-intrusive check that you can run while there are users connected to your cluster. The second tip is about patch level. Like with the database, you should patch grid infrastructure regularly. You should apply release updates and put MRPs on top. Also, I recommend that you keep the GI and database patch level in sync. So if you patch GI to 1919, you also patch your database to 1919. We do recommend mixed version or mixed patch levels, but in our own house, inside Oracle, our autonomous database, all our cloud services, all our software as a service, when they run on cluster databases, this is the method that we use, and this is what we do the majority of our testing on. So I strongly recommend that you keep the database and GI patch level in sync. Also, implement application continuity. It is a really good way of hiding both planned and unplanned events from your end users. Again, here I'll refer to the maximum availability architecture. They have really good examples on how to implement either application continuity or transparent application continuity. The final advice is about OPatch. You should always use the latest version of OPatch, like with the database. And I recommend that you use the same version of OPatch in your GI and in your database home. Now, I love patching. Patching is like my fourth baby. But I also recognize that patching is a lot of work. Ideally, you patch every quarter, but at least you patch fairly regularly. So it really puts a lot of work on you. If you have only one cluster to manage, well, then it's probably doable. But if you have 5 or 10 or hundreds of thousands of clusters to manage, all this patching can really become a lot of work. In that case, you really need to look into Oracle Fleet Patching and Provisioning. FPP can fully automate not only patching grid infrastructure, but also the database and your Exadata. And it is aware of whether you use DataGuard and so forth. Simply by a few commands, you can patch your entire stack. FPP is really such a cool tool. So if you have a big estate, you really need to look into FPP.